Hello and welcome back to the Holistic Women's Health Podcast. I'm here with my now good friend Akari, who I feel like I've really gotten to know just in the pre-intro chat, but let me tell you about her. She's an emotional biohacker who helps people move from survival mode to thriving with nervous system regulation, breath work, and human design. She blends science-backed techniques with soul-centered practices to help individuals regulate their emotions, heal from trauma, and unlock their highest potential. When she's not coaching, you can find her rollerblading at the beach or doing a 20-minute rebounder workout, always embodying the vitality she helps others achieve. I'm so excited to talk to you. Welcome to the podcast.
I am delighted to be here.
We've already, I feel like, done a little bit of a deep dive, and you clocked it right away when we got on the call. One of my first questions was, I was listening to you talk on another podcast, and you had this deep knowledge for the whys of the world, these questions of the world. So literally that was my first question. We talked about it a little bit, but I also resonated with that. And I feel like it's because we both have that 3 profile. So tell me more about that. Was that correct? Is it the 3 profile in human design, or is there something else of why we're these people who want the whys of the world?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that, it's the gate 63, which you clearly have. And I share that with you. So there's a lot of whys. There's a lot of questions that come up. We want to know why. We're curious. And then you add, that 3 profile line. And in your case, that's 6 as well, because now you have a double why. And there's a lot of curiosity around getting to the root cause of things. We want to know the why. So when I was in school and trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, I ended up falling into history because I was always very curious about the why. And of course, there's the indoctrination, right, that goes on, and they're giving you all kinds of information, but they never really answer the question, why did this happen? Why? And one of the biggest examples that I have that always makes me laugh is I'm a big Indigenous fan, right? Indigenous stories, all of that. And because it brings us to the root of a lot of different things. So they would say, I'm from Mexico City, and an hour north of Mexico City are the pyramids of Teotihuacan. And one of the things that always comes up is how that city, the Aztecs, came to it, but that city was abandoned. Why was it abandoned? It's a mystery. And it's not a mystery. It is global warming and global changing and all of the climate changes that happened during that time. And so they left. Of course, they left because water was not present, and you saw the scarcity of water, and you see it now. I mean, that whole place, that site used to have water. They have these aqueducts that were built because there used to be water. And now that water no longer is there. Of course, Mexico City is on a lake, and that lake has slowly dwindled to nothing. So when we start looking at these things, we realize that there really is a need for us to ask these why questions, because we bring awareness to the world.
Bring awareness to the world. So yeah, because it's hard to envision. And I know, again, we touched on this a little bit, but everyone is on their own journey, right? So for me, just going through the world, I'm like, everybody's asking why, right? Everybody has that natural curiosity, but it's not true at all. Some people are like, this is just the way it is. This is black and white. And that's just not the glasses that I wear.
Right. The status quo. And also think about how much safety there is in just assuming that this is how it is. There's a lot of safety for a lot of people who maybe grew up in a very chaotic home, and they need the safety of the consistency of knowing that this is not going to change. This is the way it is.
Do you feel like the work that you're doing now, it found you at the right time in your life, or do you wish that you had some of these tools when you were younger?
Gosh, yes, of course. There's a big piece that comes along with, I think everything is nervous system, right? That's my big belief because I've seen it. So growing up, I wish that I had these tools, but I didn't because I grew up with parents that were dysregulated. So there was no way that I could be co-regulated with my parents who were constantly in this state of dysregulation. And if, and everybody experiences that family system different because everyone has a different level of resiliency in their nervous system. Like for me, it was always very triggering to hear my mom nag. It drove me crazy. Not that she had to nag to me. I was the yes child. I was like the one who mom said, hey, I need you to do this. And I just get up and get it done. But that was just my way of being. Whereas my siblings were like, why me? Why do I have to do it? And then she'd have to nag and it would drive me crazy. It's like, why don't you just take care of it? It's so easy. But that was their nervous system and that was their timeline. That was their life and soul journey of having to question authority. and also, right, like who were they in the pecking order of kids? And we've learned so much about how the older ones carry so much of that responsibility of whatever it is that the parents want, need. And so I take that into consideration. But yeah, that's a big thing for me is the authority stuff also comes into play.
Are you the eldest daughter?
Yes. And what I didn't realize, right, because we don't have awareness, what I didn't realize is that being the eldest, I was also bossy. And in my human design chart, I am not here to be the leader from the front. I'm here to lead from the back. And recently I realized that the one that had to change in that family dynamic was me. Because when I started to lead from the back, the siblings just became much more receptive and have really shown up because our parents are getting older. And so caring for our parents has become a full-time job for all of us. And because I'm not leading from the front, but leading from the back, everyone has really taken ownership of how they're going to show up individually without it being overbearing for just one person.
What's leading from the front and leading from the back?
Leading from the front is where I tell everybody what to do.
Okay, leading from the back is just showing up and kind of being an example?
No, leading from the back is going, ooh, so here's an idea. What do you think?
Okay.
And then them
kind of
going,
putting it back.
Yeah, and then allowing them to say yay or nay and to recognize why they're saying yes or no. Instead of me seeing it and naming it, I see it. But I'm also the older one, right? I'm the one who's lived more. I have more experience. But if I tell them what to do, then they don't get a chance to learn and logically kind of go, oh, this is why I can see why you're suggesting this, or I can see why you're suggesting this, but I have another idea. And then allowing them to be heard and seen and witnessed and validated for their own strengths and their own critical thinking.
And then what does a regulated parent look like? Because I know you talked about, and then co-regulation too. What are these terms?
So I always say, I'm going to give you an example. Have you ever seen a toddler have a tantrum?
Yes.
And what happens to your nervous system?
Panic.
Yeah. Like you get hot, right? You're just like, oh my God, shut that child up. That's a dysregulated nervous system. That toddler needs something. It maybe needs to be soothed, right? Because his or her nervous system is dysregulated because they need something. They're not even verbal, and they don't understand what they're feeling. They can't even tell you, hey, I'm hot. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I'm thirsty. So if a parent is dysregulated, they don't come at that 3-year-old throwing a tantrum with a soothing voice. What's wrong? What's going on? And it's like kind of silly for an adult to be asking a 3-year-old these questions because the 3-year-old can't answer. And instead you're turning that 3-year-old into like, you're throwing them into a more dysregulated space. Now, if you were to come and if you were to soothe that baby and say, come here, I've got you. It's okay. It's okay. Come here. And it doesn't matter. They can be in a state of like complete disruption. But if you're coming with them calmly, and I'm not saying it's going to be this easy 100% of the time, but this is where your nervous system, you're lending that child your nervous system by showing up regulated. And so co-regulation is when you meet with someone and out of the kindness, right? Out of kindness, out of compassion, you share a space where it's safe and a space where you can get connected. Because when we show up dysregulated as well, then there's no connection. And where there's no connection, there's no safety. And where there's no safety, we experience trauma.
Okay. It's starting to make sense, kind of like puzzle pieces. So if we're thinking about the parent of the toddler who's having the tantrum, how is it just practice of just keeping the nervous system? Like, how do we show up as that parent that's like, okay, it's okay, you got this, coming from that compassionate side instead of just instantly going to the panic, the hot-headed, type of feeling? Is it just, do we practice this over time, or how do we regulate that nervous system so we can show up as that regulated person?
So let's go deeper than that. Where did you learn to show up that way?
Yeah. Everything from your childhood, your parenthood or situations or the little T's, the little traumas here and there.
So when we talk about generational trauma, right? When we talk about what gets passed on, this is how my mom did it. This is how my mom's mom did it. This is how her mom did it, because we come from a line of dysregulated nervous systems. And when you decide that the buck stops here, you're like, well, this just doesn't feel right. And that's how it showed up for me when I had my daughter. It was, there are things, of course, that were patterns that were passed on and that I had no awareness, and that my nervous system was dysregulated, and it would drive me like bonkers, right? It was like I couldn't help myself. And yes, it is practice. Yes, it is learning to take a breath. People say, oh, just pause when you're angry. I'm sorry, but the reptilian brain is not going to let you, right? The brain is so powerful, and it loves patterns. It loves to go on autopilot. So if you have shown up this way with a child, you have to ask yourself, where in my life have I shown up this way before too? Because it's not the first time. And because it's patterns, and because the brain loves patterns and it loves repetition, we need to learn how to disrupt these patterns. And it's not an easy feat. I'm not saying that, it's easy, but it is definitely achievable. And it does take practice, and it does take commitment to not wanting to continue this pattern to get passed on to your children. And I'm a big believer that if my parents would have done 1% at least of their own work, it would have had a ripple effect, not just on the children, but on the grandchildren, right? Because now my mother's getting ready to have her first great grandchild. And she could have done a better job at helping with our nervous system, because then my brother would have had more patience with his kids, which means that his son may have had a different experience. And hopefully in his awareness now, he gets to be a better parent to his soon-to-be daughter. You know what I'm saying? Like it trickles down. And it trickles down individually, because I can't be responsible for my brother's lineage. I can only be responsible for my lineage. And I can only hope that the ripple effect of what I have been able to share with them, that some of that is going to show up for them. But I can't be, the one responsible for saving anybody. I'm not here to save anybody. I'm here to save myself, just like they're here to save themselves.
I know that's a big motivator for a lot of people when they become parents and they have kids and they're thinking, okay, like you said, this stops with me here. How do we disrupt that pattern if they're like, okay, I want to become aware and start to regulate my nervous system? I need to disrupt the pattern of instantly, this is how my mom reacted, or this is how, who's ever home I was in reacted. How do we change that?
I think having the awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Understanding that these are patterns, because once you understand that these are patterns, that this is not inherently how you can react, like you have a choice. A lot of us, that autopilot, you think, this is just the way I've always been. And it's hard to change. It's hard to admit to yourself that this is something that you really need to work on. Once you surrender to the fact that it isn't, it's your nervous system, and you start to look deeper into it. I have a really big thing around people who do breath work, and then they just say, hey, come do breath work, you're going to heal. And it's like, no, you're resetting your nervous system. You're not going to heal. Like that's, what are you going to do? Drop yourself on the floor and do breath work? It doesn't make any sense. But breath work does that nervous system reset. And that's the beginning of unwinding the nervous system. But it has to become a practice. You can't do it once and go, I feel amazing, this is great. It's not enough for the brain to start shifting. So once you commit to something and you start doing it and you start doing it and you start doing it, then you start to disrupt that nervous system. Because because of the knowledge that I received from doing these breathwork circles and helping people with breathwork, I realized that people come back when their life is so stressful, when they're just so burdened. They come back to do breathwork. So that's when I started looking at it. Oh, like this is kind of like a Band-Aid. Like I'm not feeling well. Change my Band-Aid, right? This Band-Aid is coming off. And so I realized that breath work is amazing to reset your nervous system, but there has to be something more powerful. And that's where I started to dive deeper into the science of the heart. And when I started to learn more about the heart and the heart brain, it was just like, my whole brain exploded. It's like I've been making decisions with the logical brain, but the logical brain is here to keep me safe. And so every time I make these decisions, am I really making the best decision for myself, or am I making decisions that keep me safe?
For simplicity, for someone who's doesn't really understand nervous system or nervous system regulation, these terms, if you were to explain it like a 5-year-old, how would you explain that?
So nervous system regulation is, it's hard to explain in very simple terms, right? Because the nervous system is what runs the show. It runs the show. It's how you're feeling. So, for example, if you are a 5-year-old and you have all of your toys out in the living room and you're playing with just one, but everything's out because it just feels good to have everything out. And your dad comes home and he's tired and he's hungry and he's grumpy, and he opens the door and he sees all these toys all over the place. Instead of having that like happy face of I'm home and that welcome, he can probably look a little disappointed or frustrated, right? The adult who doesn't have that strong nervous system. And then he shows up with that 5-year-old, and that 5-year-old, right? You're looking up to this big man with a very big, deep voice. Well, even if he's not yelling, he still has his voice maybe is his tone, right? Because the tone gets to us all the time.
The tone, yes.
Yeah, maybe the tone comes in. And so now, if there is no connection after that, it imprints in us. There's an imprint that's left. And so as we go throughout life, when someone raises their voice, that trigger shows up. And maybe you get teary-eyed, or maybe you get afraid. Right? For a long time, I had a lot of fear of men with very deep voices who would change that tone, and it would trigger me. So when my partner has a certain tone, my daughter and I always go, "You're talking like a dad." We don't want that dad voice, because it's triggering.
The disruption of the pattern. Yeah.
And so we bring awareness to him, and he starts to shift it, and he doesn't know. He's like, I don't know. I don't know unless you share it with me. So that's a big thing. So that the nervous system reacts. It just reacts to things that don't feel good. And it brings a trigger, just like smell, right? Like when you smell a particular flower that you absolutely love, and all of a sudden you're at a perfume shop and you smell that, it brings all of this flood of beautiful memories. It's the same thing with the nervous system. When something, a smell, a sound, a tone comes through, and you have no idea where it came from. And it could have been so insignificant as the dad comes home tired, but there's now an imprint. And the nervous system, the brain can't tell if it's in the present moment or if it happened a long time ago. So that is why when we're in a heated argument and something triggers us, it is hard for us to identify where that is coming from. When did that happen? And I'll give you an example. My mother is a very defined manifesting generator, emotional, okay, with emotional waves. I am a generator with a lot of openness. And so it was always very heavy energy for me. But for her, it was doing a million things, and always like this perfectionism thing that she would put on me. Like, you need to, if you're going to do it right. If not, don't do it at all. But that wasn't true, because I still had to do it, right? So there was a way that my partner would show up, and he would say things to me. And I would say, "You sound just like my mother." And that's when it was like, oh, it isn't him. It is something that triggers a memory of how my mother would react to certain things that he just happened to express in a way that I was receiving it like, oh, like this is my mother, and it would trigger me. It would trigger me. So we go back to the original thing, is like, how do people disrupt these triggers? It takes practice, and you start small. You start small. You can't go 360, right? You just can't, because then it's not sustainable. We start very small. The nervous system is a delicate thing to play with. There is so much room to re-traumatize a person. And so using techniques that are very trauma-informed is a really big deal. People who are not trauma-informed can show up and say, well, you didn't have it so bad. Why are you complaining? What's the big deal? Well, when you are trauma-informed, you realize, like you said earlier, there's big T trauma and little t trauma. And sometimes little t trauma, the compounding effects of it are worse than big T trauma, because you know that for big T trauma, you can go see someone and that is it. But then when you have so many little T traumas at the same time, then it becomes what we call complex, right? Complex. We call it CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's when it becomes, just tricky to work with. So starting slow is my favorite way of addressing these things and going at it. So first is bringing awareness to that nervous system. Like we're talking about, ooh, getting curious. So there's this trigger when he talks to me this way. And sometimes we don't even realize that it's a tone. When he talks to me this way, I get this reminder, where is this coming from? And that should lead you somewhere. And if it doesn't lead you somewhere, it's okay, because the brain is a powerful beast. I recently came to I listened to a woman speak, and she was saying, why your brain acts like an a-hole. And it's like, because the amygdala shuts down, right? And when the amygdala shuts down, we don't always have a memory connected to the trigger because the brain decides whether it is too much. Like Goldilocks, it's either too much or not enough, or it's perfect. So there are certain things that we can remember quite accurately, and there are things we have no memory of. There's just a response. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just your brain doing what it needs to do, which is to keep you safe. And that's why the woman was referring to your brain as an a-hole, right? Because it's like it decides whether or not you can remember or whether you have the capacity to remember certain things. And I sometimes get upset. I'm like, really? I could have really figured that one out on my own. But it shuts down. And when it shuts down, there's an even more complex thing that happens. The hippocampus in the brain, call it the record taker, right? It's like writing notes about everything that's happening. It's like, all right, it's coming. And the hippocampus, when cortisol in your body starts to rise, the hippocampus has these little receptors that invites the cortisol in, and then it floods the hippocampus. And then the hippocampus is cortisol drunk and can't write exactly what happened. And so you have this memory of things that is a little off. And you will say, well, I remember this happened this way. And the parent will say, that's not what happened. And then the sibling will go, well, I remember it this way. Because everyone's cortisol went up. There was a really big argument, and everyone shut down in different places that the amygdala allowed you to see or not see, experience or not experience. And so, yeah, it's tricky. It is very tricky.
My mom and I have definitely had that conversation before. We would bring up something from my childhood and she's like, that's not how it went. And I was like, listen, that's how I remembered it. That's how my body imprinted it. And so now, when this happens or that, and she's like, oh, that's so interesting. And it is interesting because I would have been a kid. So maybe, the details are a little bit blurrier for me. But it doesn't matter because it's my body that, is recognizing it as this way. And it's so fascinating to me when I finally found that out. I was like, oh, my brother and I had entirely different childhoods, even though we grew up in the same home. We just experienced things totally different. And just to allow permission for me to hear that, I was like, oh, it's eye-opening.
So it makes things so much easier too, because then you realize, oh, maybe it wasn't that way. And so we have this narrative, right? We hold on to these narratives and we see it a certain way, which is why I bring human design into this, because there's a shift in the way we tell our story that isn't always going to be 100% accurate or correct. We're all on different timelines.
So how does human design come into that?
We have these open and closed centers, right? They're defined centers. The defined centers are very consistent with the energy and need to evolve. We need to allow ourselves to experience things differently. And then you have different types of people. I think projectors and reflectors get a really hard rap, and manifestors too, because they don't have that sacral life force energy. And they will be referred to as lazy or not doing enough. And even generators that have a defined will center, they are meant to rest because it's not sustainable for them to work and work and work and work. Rest is definitely something we all need, but it shows up differently depending on the type. So human design comes and gives you permission slips to rest, to know that you are here to give yourself a break, that we all experience burnout. And as you start to see the chart and how it unfolds in your unique way and in your unique story, then we're unfolding the story of your life and kind of massaging that nervous system to start shifting the way the story was told. Because we also have a lot of arrogance, right? We think we know how everyone else should be doing things. And we don't. We don't even know what we should be doing. What makes us, the people that know everything about everybody else?
Oh, there's so many different places I want to go, but you said earlier start small.
Mhm.
So, okay, the breath work, because you said that can work, but maybe not in the moment. So, is that something we do proactively just to continue to keep ourselves regulated and, maybe open things up, maybe open up some wounds and work through some of that? And then you talked about heart brain. So, take us through.
The heart brain, yeah. The heart brain is so juicy. So the heart has been studied by the Heart Math Institute. Are you familiar with Joe Dispenza's work?
Mhm.
Okay, so Joe Dispenza's work is based off of the Heart Math Institute. I'm a big fan of the Heart Math Institute. So the years they've spent about not about over 25 years into the science of the heart. If we look at old civilizations, remember I said I love these indigenous civilizations, and who did they revere? The sun, the heart. Connect to your heart. And so now that the science is catching up, which kind of sad, right? Because we need the science to quantify and qualify for some of us. But what has been discovered is that the heart has a brain. So if we are sitting with our back to the door and someone walks up, we get that feeling that something or someone is behind us. It is not the brain, because the brain does not have an electromagnetic field outside of our bodies. It's the heart. So the heart senses it, sends the message to the brain, hey, brain, I think you need to turn around. And then you turn around. And sure enough, there's someone there. So that 3 to 5 feet outside of your body, you also come across so many people and you don't even know the person, and you're already going, ugh.
You get a vibe.
You're in my space.
Yeah. In an elevator with someone, you're like, there's a vibe in here.
There is a vibe and I don't like it. And it becomes very personal, right? And then lo and behold, you get off that elevator and you meet up and you're like, oh, actually, we're in the same space and we're sitting together and I get to talk to you and I actually absolutely love you. And that's when you recognize it is energy. It is not personal. The stuff that your mom did or did not do was not personal. It was just energy. It was who she is by design. And sometimes our parents are growing up with us, right? They have their burdens and their traumas. And that right there freed me from my narrative and from my story, understanding that it was by design. The woman's crazy by design.
We have lots of generational stuff going on in our uteruses, and that impacts our energy in our heart, I feel.
For sure. So it just really understanding that. So when you start to study the heart brain and you start to realize that 80%, it's the 80-20 rule, right? 20%, 80%, our organs in our bodies will feel things before our brains understand what's happening. And so then think of all of the messages that are going up to the brain from all of these different organs. And so the message usually goes from the organs. Sometimes it goes to the heart, and then the heart sends the message. But if there's just too much going on, the brain's like scattered. It's like, what is going on? I'm getting all of these different messages and I can't figure them out. So sometimes we open our mouths and something bizarre comes out of it, right? So much is happening. So many thoughts, so much information is being processed. And when you realize that the number one job of the brain is to keep you safe, then maybe connecting to my heart is the way. And as science is starting to teach us, we recognize that connection to the heart is the way. So if we realize that breath work is more of a maintenance thing to reset your nervous system, connecting to the heart is going to be the next best thing. And so I've created my own meditations that I give my clients as we start to slowly learn to connect to the brain. And the Heart Math Institute has created a biofeedback sensor, not the way, Joe Dispenza uses it, which I think is fantastic, where they do all the connections to the brain, but this one is one that connects into your ear to that heartbeat. And we start looking at your heart rate variability, and we start tracking your coherence levels. And we slowly start to go, it's about building. You're building on top of that. And it will shift that baseline. And I can tell you, because I grew up in a very chaotic home where my mom was constantly screaming and yelling. I mean, there was 5 of us, right? So I don't think that people who have a lot of little kids realize that one day they're going to have a lot of teenagers at the same time. Forget the endless diapers and bottles, the hormones. And so, of course, she was always so dysregulated, yelling and screaming. And that was my normal. And so that was my normal when I had my daughter, until she said, "Ooh, when you raise your voice, it hurts my feelings." And I thought, and see, this is that tendency of going, "Girl, you should have been in my house." That was, raising the voice and screaming. And so I had to validate her feelings. This is how she was receiving it. And it's not her fault. It is my job to shift and change. It is not her job to learn how to deal with my raising my voice. It's my job to shift and change. So, being the curious woman I am, I started looking at things. And there's so many different types of talk therapy out there, and they all have their place. My favorite one was somatic experiencing, which was created by Dr. Peter Levine. It really taught me to get inside of my body. And I dove right into it because I wanted to shift the way I showed up for my family. And yeah, it's just amazing. It's amazing how that work really has a ripple effect, because I went from that to studying the heart to, doing all of these different things that have changed the dynamic of my family. We can have hard conversations, and we usually do them at dinner time because that's our special time of connection. We have hard conversations, and it's not about not being triggered. That's not what this is about. It's about how quickly can I be in that space and recover? How quickly can I recover from that? Right? Because we're going to be triggered. But how quickly can I recover from that? And I'll tell you, I connect into my heart because I know that I can blow a fuse really quickly. And that's going to end the conversation. Then there's no connection, and then there's no safety. And then nothing's going to get resolved. But instead, if I sit there and I'm breathing through my heart, I open the opportunity to allow my family to express, number one, without me taking it personal, and opening myself to the feedback, so that then I can say, whether I need to apologize and say, "Wow, that was not my intention. I'm sorry that you received it that way." Right? Because it's not my job to be anyone that is not me, but they receive it differently. And I have to be open to that, because that's what kindness and compassion is. Is that, yeah, I'm showing authentically, but they're receiving it in a different way, and it's not my fault. But if we can have a conversation around it, that was not my intention, then they can feel safe, and we can shift that, right? Because when we talk about reprogramming the brain, it comes from that space of being able to go, "Oh, that's not how you meant it. Oh, so the next time you say it that way, that is not what you're meaning, but it's okay for me to say, hey, your tone." And then, of course, then I can regulate myself and go, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that tone does trigger you. Let me shift a little." because it's not my intention to hurt your feelings. And it's not my intention to be misunderstood either. So when we can have a dialogue without having all of the back and forth, it really opens the opportunity for healing.
I once heard on a podcast that someone said having a daughter is like holding a mirror up to yourself. So isn't it incredible that your daughter had the awareness to just outright say, what did you say? She said that
didn't feel good.
That didn't feel good. Yeah. And she was just, like holding up a mirror and you're like, oh, I have to change. So how do we connect into our heart? I know you kind of took a moment to put your hand there and kind of breathe into it. Is there any other way we can kind of connect into that?
The awareness of the heart, because a lot of us feel the big emotions in our heart. This is the science, right? The science is your heart, if you're excited, is going to be on a high heart rate. And that same high heart rate will be experienced if you're angry. So the heart rate is going to stay the same. The big impact comes from negative emotion or positive emotion. And when we experience a positive emotion, we're regenerating our energy. When we're in a negative emotion, we're just pounding our heart, literally, right? It's painful. Some of us become addicted to these high negative emotions, and we continue to play them. And so what happens? The brain loves repetition. So that sad movie comes on and you automatically start to cry because it's, you fed that. You fed it for so long. It's like a gym. It's like a big muscle. It's like, yep, that's what we do. Let's cry. But as you start to disrupt this, and I'll tell you, it is really hard to get from angry 3.0 to like joy 5.7. Like there's no way. So I teach people to neutralize these emotions. Just neutralize them. Just come into your heart and just breathe through your heart. And my favorite thing to do is to imagine, right? Because your heart, that electromagnetic field goes 3 to 5 feet outside of your body. So when you're connecting to your heart, just imagine that with an inhale, your heart is growing. And with the exhale, your body softens. Your heart softens. And that's going to help you neutralize those emotions, those big emotions. The other thing that I like to do is to imagine puppies playing. Look at that big smile.
And I'm just like, oh, cute little puppies. So
or kitty cats, kittens playing around and goofing around, chasing a light, chasing a string, like imagining that. Or my favorite is imagining a baby giggling. Like that brings me so much joy to listen to. And it's not that hard to figure it out. You finding out what brings you that joy can also help you neutralize those big feelings and emotions, because it's not fair. Think about how heavy these big emotions are, and you're carrying them throughout the day. I think one of the biggest things that gets imprinted into us from a very young age from our mothers and our grandmothers is this sense of worry. And I want to peel that layer really quickly, because I feel like anxiety and worry is one of those things that we as women carry, and we think that it's just part of being a woman. Like we're just here to worry, and we are not. So here's this big thing, and it's mind-blowing, is that my mother worrying about me had absolutely nothing to do with me and everything to do with her, because this big worry of me not being there was very uncomfortable in her body. So how did she soothe herself from this big worry? Is you need to be home at 10. I don't need you to be home at 10:10, 10:20. You need to be home punctual at 10. And it wasn't because I needed to learn punctuality. It was because then she would begin to worry. And that feeling inside of her did not feel good. So then if I was home at 10:10, the rage began. But was the rage really because I was late? Or was that rage because of that uncomfortable feeling that was stirring in her body? And she did not know what to do with it.
So the worry then turned into rage from, would you say, just the heat of the moment, or maybe from other wounds and little
behavior.
teas?
It is all learned behavior,
Yeah.
because that is what her mother did to her. And so I had to cut that out of my life, because I recognized that it wasn't even about my daughter being late. It was me feeling that worry didn't feel good. So then I refer to it as the hot potato. It was the hot potato that I had. And then I just gave it to her. Yeah. It's like, here.
So how are you teaching your daughter just throw out the hot potato, or turn the hot potato into a cold potato? Yeah.
Neutralizing that, right? So there's a big thing in my home where I say, you just need to inform. We're not going to get into anger. If you're not going to be home at the time you said, just let me know. Not that big of a deal. Just inform me. So informing is a big deal in my home. I mean, right now my kid is going to be, she's flying to Africa, right? Like way on the other side. But I don't have to worry, because I know that she'll be like, oh, just landed. That's it. I don't need an explanation of what your plans are. I just need to know you're cool, you're good. That's it. She then receives that same thing, right? Like if I'm traveling or if I'm going anywhere, I inform, hey, I'm leaving. Hey, so there's that reciprocity. So there is no longer that hot potato of that anxiety. And if she doesn't do it, I'm still not sitting there in angst, because to me, what I have trained my body to do is that if nobody's knocking on my door or calling me to tell me there's an emergency, there's nothing for me to worry about. I'm in the present, right? And anxiety is when we're in the future or we're in the past. So I ground myself in the present moment. And that is all I can control. I can't control anything outside of it. And it's such a challenge, right? It's such a challenge. It's really hard. I am being challenged right now as she's, traveling so far away from home, as she's doing this work with wild animals, right? I mean, I'm like, oh God. But that's where I really sit in that comfort of knowing that there is nothing for me to worry about until I get that call, until I get that. And I'm not sitting there waiting for it. I just am not. And that is where we start to train. That's where we let go of the hot potato. And so how do I show her how to release it is by teaching her, and for her to feel safe in her own body, and for her to feel safe in the decisions that she makes, and learning her human design and empowering her, right? Because it's not about me, it's about empowering her. I'm not always going to be here. So teaching her these lessons is the only thing that I can hand to her so that she can hand to her children. I am no longer handing her the anxiety-driven chaos. That is no longer in my lineage. It no longer lives in me.
I like the word empowering. Then, she can have these tools to pass on. And something when we're talking about imagining the puppies and the kittens and the baby laughing and things like that. So if someone has a toddler who's throwing a tantrum, or you're in a meeting with your boss and you're very anxious and your nervous system's getting dysregulated, is that when we would imagine the puppies and the kittens, or is there other tools that we can do?
If that works for you, absolutely, right? Like, yeah, like imagining these things is so key, because the moment that you start to work on these things, you take your power back. Like if your boss is being a jerk and just going off at it, you can fall right into it or be like, I don't think so. Like, this is my power. You don't get to take that from me. And this is also, there's so many modalities and techniques out there, but emotional freedom techniques, which is like the tapping, right? You can be sitting there and just tap on your fingers, any of your fingers to me, or tapping, like tapping on your chest. And the tapping on your chest to me is really huge because it keeps you in the present moment, in the now, just tapping on it. Bringing your attention away from those big emotions and into the heart to just neutralize those things are so important. So to me, the biggest tool that anyone can take is to experiment. Life gives you so many opportunities to experiment. So if you do have a toddler that is having a tantrum, I think watching the parents around you who continue eating despite of that tantrum happening, that's amazing. We judge those parents and we're like, why are you not caring? But we're judging them not because of that. We're judging them because we're uncomfortable. We go back to that whole thing is, I am so uncomfortable in my feelings and emotions right now because I'm so dysregulated. I'm going to judge the parent for not taking care of that child that is dysregulating my nervous system. But if I take a pause and I take accountability for my nervous system not being resilient enough, I recognize that nothing is wrong here, except that that child probably needs some love. That's what I want the parent to do, is to give the child some relief from this tantrum, because that child doesn't feel good. That child needs love, needs attention, needs something. And, there's just so many ways to address that. But it isn't the parent and it isn't me. It's just the child who can't verbalize what it needs.
It's just, could we be mildly dysregulated? Do we walk through our day mildly dysregulated perhaps, and then one thing like the boss calling you into a meeting and all of a sudden it sets you off? Or are we typically neutral and then we can go through really regulated or very dysregulated?
There's a window of tolerance, right? There's a window of tolerance, and we have our normal. And when something happens, we can, be in fight, right? Where we're just like ready to go. All right, let's go. You get into your warrior space. And then you can go down, right? That down regulation where you're like flight and you just want to run away, like fight or flight. So we're always going fight or we're always going flight, right? And then we have other places we go to as well, but fight and flight are the norm. If your boss is calling you and you're feeling yourself going into those spaces, you are giving your power away by showing up dysregulated. And so that's why neutralizing, right? I'm going to walk in a neutral space because I'm making up stories. I'm not even in the present moment. I'm making up stories that don't even exist. And half the time, those stories aren't even true. I am busted. I am so in trouble. What did I do? Oh my, like we go, but that's a trigger response. That goes right back to childhood. Like maybe that's what would happen. Like my mom would get really upset and I never quite knew whether she was happy or sad, or maybe it was my job. I felt like it was my job to keep everyone content and happy so that no one would be upset. Or like you're an emotional generator. I am not. I have that open solar plexus. And what happens to me is I want everything to be okay. I'm the peacemaker. So when things are like, I find myself trying to manage people's emotions, even in my home, because my daughter has those emotional waves. So something happens, dad gets upset, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to manage the situation. And again, it's not them. It is me being uncomfortable with these big emotions. So if someone is like me, right, and the boss is upset, my advice is neutralize, connect, because half that time it has nothing to do with you and it's so easily solved. I mean, I've had those moments where the boss called in and was really upset, and I managed to be there so neutral to be like, yeah, no, you're not giving me your hot potato, buddy. Like we're neutralizing that hot potato.
And you make entirely different decisions. Yeah, when you come in neutral or regulated versus dysregulated, maybe you say yes to something you don't want to say yes to, or
oh gosh,
you get hot-headed and you feed into that, or Yeah, you're just not yourself.
But you give your power away.
And if you already the biggest thing.
And if you already have a jerk for a boss and you come in dysregulated, I don't know about you, but I don't like losing. And I am not going to show up anywhere where I'm not in a neutral space. And when I show up in a space where I'm already triggered, the beautiful thing about practicing this is that that is no longer my go-to response. And so I'm able to reel it back in real time and be like, okay, so let's start over. Saying that is really hard. When you're in the middle of something and you're heated and then you just, whew, okay, so this is not serving anyone. Let's start over. You've just grabbed your power right back. So you can be in a heated conversation, connect to your heart, find that little piece of joy where you go, this is not real. This is not working. This is not going to go that way. Let's just start over because, and we're afraid to do that. We're afraid to start over, but we can totally start over and be like, all right, ground zero.
Fresh start.
Let's go at it from a different space. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
And for someone, I'm just thinking back of your situation at the dinner table where you feel like you want to manage other people's emotions. I know a lot of other people feel that way as well, where they want to manage, but you can't manage other people's emotions. And I know language is a big thing for you. So is there something that you tell yourself, or because actions play a big role, but also the words that you would say in your mind to bring yourself back and be like, okay, listen, we can't control everyone's emotions, or what goes through your mind?
The biggest thing that goes through my mind is that I've been in this space before and it didn't work out. So what can I do different? Because, right, what do they say? That the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So what can I do different that is going to give me a different result? And the biggest difference that I can do is to shut my mouth and listen or not trying to be right. Right? I'm not going to try to be right because I want to be right all the time. I'm very competitive. I want to be right. I don't want to lose. Right? So what would it be like if I just stay here? And it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to lose or that I'm wrong. It's just a different perspective. And when we unravel whatever it is that we're discussing, sometimes she realizes that she was not open to receiving the feedback that was being given, or that she wasn't open to, an outlook. And so then she gets to sit with that and be like, oh, and it was like what we were talking about. You either learn through love or you learn through pain. And I'm not here to manage that. I'm here to guide you if you want to take it. And if you don't want to take it, then you get to have your own experience. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It just, that's the way you want to learn.
And I feel like there's a stronger, I don't know if stronger is the right word, but I feel like as women and as daughters and, mothers, we just experience things a little bit differently. Like that worry, my mom growing up, she would always say, I worry about you differently than I worry about your brother. And as a teen, I'm like, what does that even mean? But I know there's something that kind of connects us in a different way as grandmas to moms and daughters than other relationships. So why are we always the worriers and why do we carry so much of this anxiety and feeling like we need to be in control and worry about different things?
Because we are conditioned to believe that.
So it all comes from conditioning from great grandma, grandma, like the whole lineage all the way down.
Think about how you've been fed all your life to believe this. Think about the TV shows that you've watched. It's like magazines, the social aspect of it. It is fed, spoon fed. And if you're not worrying, you don't care. And sure enough, my daughter has said, well, you don't call me. When she was in college, she'd say, you never call me. Do you not care about me? And I would say, no, I actually respect your time so much. And this is the time that you need to be out discovering yourself. And I know that you're going to connect to me if you need something. You're always welcome to call me. And so I made it a point to reach out to her more, but it was her wanting me to reach out versus me constantly being the one. And I would get parents who would say, I call her and she doesn't respond, or she sends me to voicemail, and it's like, stop calling her. Leave her alone. You're overbearing. Listen to the cues. She's going to come to you if you allow her to. But if you're constantly chasing her, it doesn't make any sense. So we've been fed this idea that we need to be the ones chasing after our kids and after our girls. And it's like, we don't need to. You know, from my experience, allowing her to be and leaving her alone has created such a closeness where she comes and she actually shares things, where she is so close to me that sometimes I can't relate because that wasn't my experience with my mom. My mother was chasing after me so much that it was just so, I felt just choked, right? Like I just felt like I couldn't breathe. And so experimenting what I could do different, because my grandmother, as she got older and as her younger kids got to an age where they were going out, I would spend a lot of time with her and she would say, she's going to be fine. And so that's where I think I grabbed that new way of being, because my grandmother and my mother were two different people. And not to say that my grandmother wasn't that way with my mom. It's to say that her wisdom came at an opportune time. And there's a trilogy that I read, Conversations with God. And it is through that you know, the book talks about that as well, right? That why are you worried? And so listening to that trilogy and watching my grandmother, and then the trilogy also talks about the importance of grandmothers in our lives, because our parents are parenting as they are growing. Our grandparents are parenting through their wisdom years, everything that they have lived through and seen. And so I feel like maybe I got some of that wisdom from my grandparents and then could parent differently. My mother didn't spend that much time with her grandparents. And hence, you know, it was a different way. And so I feel a big responsibility with my daughter, because again, my mother's not going to be a grandparent with a more defined way of being. Like, she hasn't done her work so that she could impart a lot of wisdom onto my kid. But then I've taken the responsibility to do the work for my mother and for myself so that I can show up differently. And so the wisdom that my daughter has in her now is going to be much different than I'd had. And so when she has her kids, I'm hoping that the seeds that I am now planting will show up then, even if I'm not around.
I feel like your daughter's a great communicator, whether that's her natural being, or do you feel like that also comes from you being regulated and showing up in a whole different way that allows her to be able to open up and communicate and really speak to what she needs plainly, openly, and clearly?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different factors to that. One of them is, yes, absolutely, me being regulated and being able to come from a neutral space allows her to have these neutral conversations with a lot of people. And she is wise beyond her years. And her human design chart, though, right? We go back to that human design chart. It helps her. It helps her a lot because she is a 3-5 profile. And that 5 line is a very karmic mirror where a lot of people come to her for her to fix things or make things pretty. And because she has that wisdom that now is being imparted into her from a different perspective, not just the intuitive hits that she gets, but the line of work that I'm in. Obviously, she learns a lot, and then learning more about how she is not here to teach people, but to show them the way. It creates a difference in her life. I do believe that our human design chart shows us a lot, and then we get to evolve from it and use it as a tool to grow.
I can't wait to keep diving into that because I feel like there's, yeah, we did a little mini, like you said, we scratched the surface before.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm excited to just go deeper. And I feel like you have a lot of resources. Are there any other resources or books or anything that you feel really called to sharing right now? Anything coming to your mind and your heart?
There's my big gift to your audience is to not be shy to learn more about the nervous system. I have a free meditation on my website and on my Instagram account that I do believe is a huge baseline shifter. But like everything, it has to be done on a regular basis for it to work, because that's going to be the one thing that's going to disrupt, right? That's the big disruptor. I went through a really hard patch with my business with someone who was supposed to help me and then just ghosted me and left. And it left me with my wounds, right? My wound of abandonment. And so all of these things started coming up for me. And I went looking for meditations that were going to help me connect to my heart in a deeper way through the work that I do. I was like, there has to be something, and it wasn't there. And so I created it, and I thought, oh, let me put it out there. So it's on YouTube and it's on my website, because it was such a gift that I was able to give to myself, and it didn't exist. So there it exists. It's out there for other people to tap into. And I have had so many women come back and say, I've got it on YouTube on repeat, because it just helps me get out of my space of that triggered space and get into that neutral space that I need. And so that is something that I highly recommend for someone who wants to, dive into that. And my website also has the human design chart, and the way it's strategized, the way it's there is that you can download it, and at the bottom you can get a 12-page report that's free to give you an introduction to human design. And then if you want to go to a personalized, you want to get really personal about it, there is a report that you can purchase on there. And with that report, I meet with you for 20 minutes just to go through it, because it's so complex. It is very complex. And I personally don't think it's fair to give something to someone and not help them dismantle it a little bit so that it makes more sense, because some of us are visual learners and some of us, are
The researcher.
Like we need to hear it. We need to be walked through it. And when you walk someone through it, then they go, oh, I get it now. Like there's dots that can be connected that way. So I try to make myself as accessible as possible to all the people, because, my people are the ones that want to shift and change. Those are my people. And then the resources really just start to come because I have so many resources. Recently, I was in a summit, and I finally was able to connect the nervous system with the human design chart. And so I have a free masterclass on YouTube as well for people who want to figure out why, right? The why do I react this way? And so I break it down very, very basic and very slow, because this kind of work needs to be taken slow. It's an experiment after all.
Yeah. And I think that's the fun part, is you get to experiment and play. And I'm just recently getting really into meditation and visualization. So I'm going to go do the free meditation and and just see what comes my way. And then I'll also link it in the podcast too for everyone to listen to. And I just appreciate you so much. This was so fun and eye-opening for me. And I appreciate you and your energy and the work that you do, and you're just so full of knowledge. And I appreciate you for being so open as well and just sharing everything that came.
Thank you. I think that's a big piece is showing up with integrity and sharing the things that have shifted, because we have this belief that we're like a lone wolf in a lonely island of one. And it's not true. The more we share, the more we recognize that we have so much in common. And as women, the power comes in sharing and having circles and connecting and understanding that we have so much wisdom to leave behind for others to pick up and grow from.
And yeah, I appreciate you so much for sharing everything.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun to have a conversation and to recognize women. And I know I didn't say this, but my purpose to work with women, especially women who have children, is because I love children. And it doesn't matter how much work I do with the child, the change happens with us. And by helping women and helping them with their nervous system is my way of reaching out to those children, because children are our future.
I was just thinking that in my brain. The words right out of your mouth.
So there.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. As usual, all the information will be in the show notes to this episode. If you're looking to balance your hormones this spring and summer, then definitely book a free call with me. Check out all my services on my website. I'll also leave them in the show notes below. And if you want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram at Nutrition Moderation, as well as my website, nutritionmoderation.com. I appreciate you so much for being here and listening. I hope you're having the best day ever wherever you are, and I'll chat with you very soon.